Senator from Pennsylvania.
Mr. President, I rise to address this issue for 5 minutes.
Without objection.
Mr. President, first, let me mention I'm a gun owner. I have an A rating with the NRA. Second Amendment is extremely important to me, to my constituents, to Pennsylvanians generally, to Americans generally. But let me be very clear about this, too. Second Amendment does not apply equally to every single American. That is not even a controversial notion. Second Amendment was never meant to apply to young children. Nobody disputes that. Second Amendment does not apply for people who forfeit their Second Amendment rights by committing crimes for which they're convicted. And it can't apply and does not apply to people who've been adjudicated as mentally dangerous. So those are the three classes of Americans for whom the Second Amendment does not apply, as it does and should and must for everyone else. And so the goal that Senator Manchin and Senator Schumer and Senator Kirk and I set out when we began this process, and I want to really thank my friend from West Virginia. He's worked harder than anybody on this, and Senator Schumer, who's worked very hard as well, and Senator Kirk, who from the beginning provided very important leadership on this. The goal was to see if we can find a way to make it a little bit more difficult for the people who have no legal right to have a gun for them to obtain it. That was the goal. And along the way, we thought that if we can find some ways to better secure the opportunities for law-abiding citizens to exercise their Second Amendment rights, that'd be terrific to work into this, and we did that as well. So how do we attempt to make it a little bit more difficult for criminals and the dangerously mentally ill to purchase handguns? We do it in essentially two ways. One is to just strengthen the existing background check system. By strengthening, what I mean is encourage states to provide the information that they already have and that some do provide but some don't. In other words, the states have records about people who have been adjudicated as dangerously mentally ill. For instance, those people who plead not guilty to a crime by reason of insanity, those people who are deemed to be mentally incompetent to stand trial. So we have records at the states of people who've been adjudicated as mentally unfit to have a firearm. And then, of course, it's states that have the criminal records. And so all we're doing is encouraging these states to provide this information so that when a criminal attempts to buy a handgun or a long gun, or when someone who is dangerously mentally ill attempts to do so, the background check system can capture them. So that's the first big piece. It doesn't create a new system. It doesn't expand in any way the existing system, except to encourage states to provide the information that they already have. The second thing we do is we ask to have background checks at gun shows. We already have background checks if you buy from a licensed dealer. In my state, in Pennsylvania, anyone who buys a handgun anywhere at any time has a background check. So what this would do in Pennsylvania is it would extend background checks for commercial sales, which are conducted at gun shows, and for advertised sales over the internet. Now, I've got to tell you, there is absolutely no way that this can be construed as an infringement on the Second Amendment rights. And you don't have to take my word for this, but I would take Justice Scalia's word for this in the Heller decision, where he quite rightly came to the conclusion, as did a majority of this Supreme Court, a conservative majority, came to the correct conclusion, in my view, that the Second Amendment is an individual right. It's not contingent on membership in a militia. It's not a collective right of multiple people. The founders didn't acknowledge collective rights. It's an individual, personal right. They were correct. But in that decision, Justice Scalia also observed that there is nothing unconstitutional about legislation that would limit or restrict and try to prevent the purchase of firearms by people who don't enjoy this right. So that's what we do. Now, I know there's been a great deal of concern about a registry. No one would oppose a federal registry of firearms more than me. There's no need for the government to have one, and only bad things could result. And fortunately, Senator Manchin and I are completely in agreement on this. And so while it's already illegal, we further strengthen the prohibition against that by stating in our amendment that any federal employee, not just those who are members of the ATF, but any federal employee who even begins the process of compiling the data that could lead to a registry would be committing a felony subject to 15 years imprisonment. That's a pretty tough reality that anyone even thinking about doing this, I think would weigh very seriously. And thereby, I believe strongly, we preclude the possibility, the danger of an inappropriate registry. Finally, I mentioned we enhance the opportunity for law-abiding citizens to enjoy their Second Amendment rights. We do it in a variety of ways. One is we clear up some risk that people take. Law-abiding citizens who are traveling across multiple states, a sportsman, a hunter who packs a weapon quite properly, but as he's traveling gets into a state that has a different regime, we clarify that that person's not committing any crimes or violating any laws. We allow the purchase of handguns out of state. They're subject to background checks. Why not? We current law prohibits active duty military personnel from buying a weapon in the state, their home state. We repeal that as well. Folks, a similar measure to this, except without the benefits for Second Amendment supporters, an expansion of background checks was on the House floor in 1999. That bill was endorsed by the NRA. I voted for it. A majority of Republicans voted for it. We did so because it was common sense. This isn't gun control. This is common sense. This is a modest measure to increase the chances that we can keep guns out of the hands of people who have no legal right to have a gun. I think we're going to have a close vote today. I want to thank all my colleagues who've considered this and given us every opportunity to make our case. I want to again thank Senators Manchin and Schumer and Senator Kirk for the very hard work they've done on this, and I urge them to support the Manchin-Toomey amendment. With that, I yield the floor.